Halloween has, unfortunately, never been a big deal out here in Scotland. And that's always bummed me out because I love Halloween. But after this year, I think I'll be happy never celebrating it again. My street and the street over has a lot of young kids who go out on trick-or-treating. So while I was out shopping all day with my mom, we decided to pick up some sweets in case anybody came to our door. I had plans to go to the cinema to see Ouija with my boyfriend. So when I got home, I was getting myself ready to go out, and my mom was busy putting the shopping away. So when the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who had to answer it. There were children from our street, the next one over, and some I couldn't recognize, as well as an adult at the end of the path. I guessed either a father or an older brother by their size. And they were dressed all in black and had some sort of mask covering their face, but it wasn't anything I recognized from a movie or anything. Anyway, they all told me their jokes and I gave them their treats, and they made their way back down the path and on to the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed that the guy with the kids was still standing at the end of my path. He hadn't noticed, and he wasn't watching the children either. He was looking right at me, and my skin started to crawl when I realized that he was just staring at me. I backed slowly into the house and watched him as he raised his hand and waved very slowly at me. And I was about to call out to him when my mom came to the door to make sure I was alright, and he took off in the opposite way from the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and he left as soon as he realized I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaked out and told my boyfriend all about it when he came to the house to pick me up, but I quickly forgot all about it when we were watching the movie. When I finally got home, it was getting really late and trick-or-treating was well and truly over around here. When I got inside, my mom was just getting ready to take the dogs out for a walk so that they could do their last-minute business and they would meet my dad on his way home from work, so I was going to be home alone. After my previous horrible encounter, I don't really like being home alone, but it's worse on Halloween, and it always has been. Anyway, I was home alone and I grabbed some snacks and went up to my bedroom and onto my computer so that I could do some of my writing and scroll through Tumblr and listen to music. After my first encounter with the guys coming into my house and into my backyard, my dad bought a motion-censored light and attached it to the wall of our house right outside my window. Normally it would go off whenever a cat walks along our fence, but it will usually go off after a couple of minutes. I always know when the light has come on because it lights up my whole room given where it's placed, and while I was sitting at my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first because I knew that it would go off soon, but 5 minutes passed and it still hadn't gone off, so I opened my blinds to have a look outside and see what was going on. My stomach almost fell out of my ass when I looked out and saw the creep from hours before sitting on my fence, waving at my window to keep the lights on. His waving slowed down suddenly when he spotted me, and it was all seriously creepy again, and I didn't know what to do. I just got flashbacks from before. Luckily, I heard the front door open and my parents coming into the house with the dogs, so I rushed down the stairs and started screaming at them about the guy on the fence. My dad didn't question me. He just took the dogs and rushed through the house, threw the back door open and ran outside. And then I heard him shouting, "Get the fuck out of here, you creep, I'm going to phone the fucking police." Dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to call the police because I didn't want to relive the whole thing again. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget all about the whole night. I started working at a small local pizza shop in my hometown. After a few days, I became really good friends with the early morning housekeeper for the bar next door. She was really cool and mysterious, very mysterious. Along with her, I made friends with some of the cooks. One cook and I started hanging out every weekend, and eventually the housekeeper became comfortable with us coming over. Now, I was not expecting what I walked into. Her house was like the party store threw up Halloween and horror in her house. She had many odd collections, stones, dead flowers, herbs, and many books on witches and black magic. Her prized possession was a real human skull she got off a crackhead many years prior. Needless to say, it took some warming up to get used to her house. Though spooky, it was still very inviting. Cut to Halloween 2020, and it's a full moon. Halloween was my friend's only holiday she ever celebrated, so she went big. By this time, the cook we made friends with had become absolutely insufferable to be around, so we hatched an idea to scare the absolute piss out of him. For the plan, my friend and her daughter and I sat down to talk about what we wanted to do. I mentioned how it was a full moon, so how about we go out to the oldest cemetery near us at midnight and do some EVPs and stuff. They said absolutely. Now, I'll just name my lady friend T. T was very into black magic. She wanted to take her witch's bell and open a portal. I didn't really believe her, but I went with it. Her daughter chimed in with the brilliant idea to construct a mock debug box. And when we got there, she would smash it on the ground and start acting up to scare the cook off. We should have known better. Well, I should have. On Halloween night, we were a bit late getting out the door, but at about 11:30 that night, we left T's place. The cook drove and I sat shotgun. T and her daughter were in the back, her daughter with the Dybbuk box in her hand. T did an amazing job making it look absolutely authentic. So as we drove, we didn't think much about the box. I had brought my EVP recorder and EMF detector with us. I set the EMF detector in the door as we drove and had it off. All of a sudden, T's daughter giggled and shook the mock Dybbuk box, and out of nowhere, my EMF meter started to go off and beep. It wasn't on. We all went silent, and the whole mood shifted. We got to the cemetery and all kind of nervously got out of the car. The whole area was glowing. The leaves glistened in the moonlight, and the tombstones were almost ethereal with the glow from the granite reflecting from the moon. Clear skies, and all alone, we slowly made our way to the back part of the cemetery. It was so beyond silent out there. We find a good spot and T says, "Okay everybody, sit in a circle." She then opens a container and pours her sacred salt mix around us and warns us to not leave for any reason until we are done. At this point, I'm ready to go home. The cook looks absolutely terrified. I'm absolutely dreading the feelings in the air. So, we all sit. T puts the box in the middle of us and puts both the EMF and EVP recorder next to it. Her daughter started playing a spirit box app, and the sounds that came out of it silenced us. "Let me out," it said. Then the EMF went nuts. Suddenly I got that gut-sinking feeling I wasn't alone with them anymore, and we were in serious trouble. Silence falls over us and we all kinda stare at each other. Now me and T and her daughter had not at all planned on this box actually being real, but somehow she managed to catch some entity inside. Then like we were snapped from a trance, we realized there was walking coming from the woods inches from us. We can clearly see no one is there. I closed my eyes and grabbed T's hand and said, "Okay, I'm officially scared, what do we do?" She said, "It's fine, ghosts aren't real." I said, "Bitch, you and I both know that's a lie." And as I said that, the cook stands up and says, "Yo guys, I think we really need to get the heck out of here. I can hear people all around us." At this point, he kicks the salt circle open and starts walking to the car. T's daughter smashes the box and says, "Screw it, let's go." So we all frantically follow. When us girls got home, we knew we messed up. We didn't close the door we opened. We actually caught something in the box. We might have let it out there by accident. All I know is, since then, none of us four have been right. I never feel like I'm alone, and if I'm working alone, I always have to double check I'm really alone. I've always believed in the paranormal, but now I'm a firm believer in black magic. This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This bummed my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with our friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to still be trick-or-treating and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over because they still wanted to go trick-or-treating. So that left me home alone with my brother handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 p.m. almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch watching the scary movie, stuffing ourselves with the candy, when there was a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking on the door this late. I assumed that it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we were out of candy or that we weren't home. So I assumed it was my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie, and he also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was going to open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door and was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted at him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you alone in there?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said, "Sounds like you're not alone in there." I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get the fuck away from my house, or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't fucking around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole until I saw him completely off our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. My brother and I were a bit paranoid after this and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now, when I think back to this, I wish we had called the police because maybe we could have been able to prevent the murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor had found her laying on her front porch, covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we knew. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them since we hadn't seen any details of his face. They went on the hunt for the man, but they never caught him. I blame myself for the poor old lady's murder because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of it all is the fact that he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her house had been left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since her door was wide open. This means that he just wanted to kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry. He only had the urge to kill.